Hello and welcome to Guitars for Bars. Today we're going to sand the Iron Mockingbird, the primer. Now I'm going to show you up close just how rough the surface is. And I'm going to explain the importance of getting this smooth, and then I'll show you the finished product. We're only going to focus on this area today because I only want to do about a 15-minute video, and it'll probably take a couple hours to do the whole guitar. And we're going to do it outside because it's a nice day. Okay, we live out in the country and there's farmers driving by once in a while with their tractors, so you may hear a little bit of farm equipment go by once in a while. I've got 3M P600 wet dry sandpaper. I'm going to use it mostly, but for the tougher spots I'm going to use 3M P400 wet dry. I've got my little foam piece that I use to wrap the sandpaper around. I've got my composite block with a piece of foam on it for areas like this, and then I've got one with no foam on it in case I really got to work on getting something really square, straight, and flat. Okay, like I said, we're going to start with this corner, and I'm going to demonstrate this little area over here is where I'm going to work, and then I'll get close-ups for you guys to see what it looks like. I'm going to start with this piece of foam on the 400 because I've got this really bad spot. If you watched the other video, you saw how thick this is right here. Now notice I just got the paper wet. I don't have it, dripping everywhere, lots and lots of water. It's just got to be wet. The idea is give it a little bit of lubrication and keep it so that you can get the sandpaper, the stuff back out of the sandpaper. Now this is Rust-Oleum clean metal primer that was put on with a brush. So this stuff isn't as hard as an epoxy primer, so it won't take as much effort to sand. So if you're using the 400 grit, be very careful. It'll be very easy to sand right through the finish and get to the wood. And if you do that, it's no big deal. Once you get all done, you go back and touch up any areas that you may have sanded through with some more primer, and then lightweight sand that again. Now this particular guitar I'm going to paint with Ceram Coat by Delta. It is an acrylic paint, and I'm going to put it on with a brush too, but it's still going to look pretty cool. This part has to be done correctly, really well, perfectly smooth if you're going to spray on a finish on top of it, because every little bump, ridge, air bubble, scratch, anything in it is going to show up in your final paint or your final clear. It just magnifies up right through your paint job. So take your time, do all this by hand, be very careful, do a little bit, wipe it off, take a look at it. You can see, I don't know, it's kind of hard with this kind of paint. You can see it's already starting to smooth out a little bit. There's a spot. You can see there's a few little depressions there I still got to get out. I'm going to leave those for the 600 because I'm getting pretty close there. And move on to another spot right here. Yeah, a little bit there. I want to have this little curved out section flattened out for you guys to see. And see how I can take this piece of foam and turn it so that I can fit it into a curved area like that. It also works the other way. It'll curve that way if you need to go over something. That's why I use the flexible stuff. And the paper's wrapped around it. That gives it a little bit of rigidity and something to back up the paper for those tougher spots. Yeah, you can see now how that's getting nice and smooth. A few little lumps there yet. Compared to that, this is getting there. So we'll go over a little bit more and see how it fills up in the paper. That's the bad thing about using hardware store products. It's not hard enough, and even though this thing's been drying for a week and a half, it still wants to booger up the paper. Okay, that's enough on that particular spot with the 400. Now I'll come right over here and see what I want to do is I want to get this little ridge nice and straight. I'm using this kind of curved part right here to get the very center of this part here, because I don't want to scuff off the corners, and it's real easy to scuff off this sharp edge and this sharp edge while you're trying to get this internal piece. So you want to use like this little curved part of it, and just, I got real light pressure. I can feel, you know, what's going on there. And this had brush strokes running the same direction as the curve, so they're coming off pretty easy. All right, let's see what that looks like. That part came off nice and easy. This one is for drying, obviously, and this one is for wiping the residue. Okay, like I said, I'll get better pictures when it's all done. You can see right through there. It's still got a little bit of depressions there. I can hit that a little bit. Might as well get that little point straightened out too. Okay, how's that looking? Let's get in the light. Not too bad. I'm going to paint this with a brush, so it's not going to be perfectly smooth. The artwork won't. But then we're going to put 5 or 6 cans of the Rust-Oleum matte finish clear on top of it, and that should give us enough bulk to get it pretty much smooth, and possibly even buff it out a little bit. Even though it's matte, the neck on the Skull Rock guitar is starting to get a little shiny from me playing it, so I do believe we can buff that stuff out. All right, now I'm gonna work on this spot here. See, I'm not even using the blocks yet because I'm not on the big flat surface. I'll use this foam thing on the entire edge. I know you can't see that good because of the shade, but it's kind of warm in the sun. And when this is all done, I'll take good pictures of it so you can see exactly how smooth it all is compared to the rest of it. And then I'll finish the rest of it off camera and get that pictures of that when it's all finished. And I'll show you that right before we start drawing on it and painting. So the next video will have the completely finished sanding on this one. I'm going to check and make sure you can see that. So I'm going to do that standing up. Yeah, let me move the camera a little bit. There. Be cautious. I don't want to rub the primer off the corners that I've already got painted there. Light pressure, you end up dropping the thing a lot. Try not to drop it on the ground, because then you'll get all kinds of dirt and dust in your sandpaper, and that's not much fun, because that'll scratch your finish. Same kind of thing. I've got the paper curved a little bit so I can focus on the inside part of this and try to stay away from the edges. Save your edges for last. It's best if you can not to even sand your edges, but if I don't, I'm gonna have a real sharp line that I don't want. And you can feel it too. You run your finger over the paint and you can feel if you've got any low spots or high spots or ridges or anything. Sometimes you can feel them better than you can see them. And you can see it's messy, so it's a good idea to wear old clothes when you're doing this. Be very careful around all your little points. Very careful. That's where your paint's going to build up, and it's also where your paint's not going to build up. So if you can get it thick on there, be very careful sanding it off. And if you don't get it thick enough, it's really easy to sand through. So that's where the corner of this comes in. I have very light pressure on it, not too much at all, because otherwise, you know, you go through this stuff and you're starting over, and you don't want to do that because it takes time. All right. A little bit more pressure there. I'm going to get that spot cleaned off. And we'll go over that once, twice, just a little bit to round that off. Okay. Let's get the camera. All right, let's see. It's not too bad. It's going to need a little bit more. It's getting a little thin there. I'm starting to see some wood, but it is pretty close to being smooth. So that little thin spot, you can see right there, I'll brush a little bit more primer on that, let it dry overnight, and then I'll just sand that smooth. But I'm about ready to quit on that part. I'm working on this little bitty spot right here. Getting through the primer to the wood right there, so there's another little spot I got to touch up. I may not even bother sanding those since I'm going to paint it with a brush, and I'm only going to put on just a little bit of primer, just enough to cover that up. But if I was going to spray this with a top coat on top of this primer, I would definitely be sanding it again. And the next guitar that we do after this, or the other one I'm working on right now, the Solo RRV project, that one is going to get epoxy primer, and it's going to get absolutely perfect finish on it. I'm not going to mess around with that one at all. This one's getting a cheap job. I'm not even sure how this is going to play when it's done. The neck on this guitar is actually a little bit crooked. It was like that before. The original neck, the neck pocket's crooked. The original neck was a little bit off. This neck is a little bit off. So what I'm going to do is glue the nut on and get the strings all lined up like that, and then glue the nut in place. So I think that's good enough to show you. So we'll stop now, take pictures of that, and then I will work on the rest of it and show you more pictures when it's done. All right, it is pretty close to being smooth. I've still got a little work to do on it. I'll use a 600 grit on that and probably try to get a little bit better lighting. I'll probably go inside and do it. But inside it wouldn't have been any better as far as you being able to see what's going on. So it's pretty close. All right, I'm going to spend a couple hours finishing this up and then get you guys really good detailed pictures of it. And then we'll move on to the artwork part.